So I'd like to introduce Ed. So yeah, Ed has been in the designing part, and he will be taking up the conversation ahead. I believe today's world works on visuals. Like visuals and the designing is a kind of a psychological triggering part. Uh, I mean, if you can hook up the audience in just a one go, uh, you have got them basically. You got your subscriber, I would say. And I think Ed is coming from that part of the world where the designing and the visual aspect of the storytelling really matters a lot, and why it is extremely important in the space industry. So Ed, on to you. You can take it up from there.
Great, thanks so much. So yeah, my name's Ed, and I'm a brand designer. I'm based in Edinburgh, Scotland. So if anybody's ever in this neck of the woods, give me a shout. What I do is translate what companies do into distinctive assets, which work around the clock to communicate with the people we've mentioned previously. So that is, investors, fans, potential employees, etc. And ultimately, the goal with any company, whether you're in space or whether you make coffee or infant milk formula, it's to be the only in your category. It's to really be the only person that people think of, not even compared to what you perceive as conventional competitors. So I'm just going to share screen as well. Hopefully this works. What I like to talk about is specifically distinctive assets. So ultimately finding interesting things about your company, which you can translate into assets which work around the clock for you. So as mentioned before, I offer tailored research strategy and creative for fast moving founders and marketers in this industry. And what I've discovered is that one of the pieces that's kind of missing, at least for a lot of the companies, is this idea of distinctiveness and how to get that distinctiveness and where to look for it. So if you look at brand experience, so the way that we interact with different space companies, this is kind of the strategy of the company realized. So if you want to see a company strategy or experience it, just look at what they're doing, talk to their people, see what they're wearing, see what their company looks and feels like. And you'll notice that most of them have exactly the same strategy. So if you look at space company websites, these are all in different segments, a lot of these, but they look and feel like they could be the same brand, especially from the perspective of somebody who's out of industry, like an investor or a prospective employee, or just somebody on the street. And then this translates into how they sound as well. So the way that companies talk about themselves is very, very similar. And it's not their fault. It's just that we hang out with people who are very similar to us in our industry. It's not even like plagiarism. It's just that we often are bombarded with the same sort of sound bites and the same visual tropes. So when it comes to marketing, the issue is that a lot of these companies are comparing themselves to others, dull to dull, rather than dull to interesting. And interesting in this situation is objective. It's not about picking out a subjective thing that I personally think it's interesting. It's more about looking at what people out there in the world would respond to in a different way, what is going to be unexpected. So the cost of this dullness, as Adam Morgan says, great book, is financial. Like if you're a dull brand and if you look the same as everybody else, feel the same, saying the same things, strategically borderline copy paste, that cost is going to be financial as well as just how you feel as being part of that company. But it also excludes everybody as well. If you're dull, it's excluding everybody who could be a potential customer, everybody who could be an advocate for your brand. We were mentioning advocacy before. So there are plenty of ways to reject it. I'm not just going to bombard you with depressing news about the space industry. It's actually really positive. The way to get out of this pit is to find your distinctive assets. And that is really it. It's about digging, it's about finding, and it's about looking at the things that make you who you are. Like, who are you really as a company? Digging underneath the surface layer. And to start with, it's going to involve a bit of pain. You've got to burn down all of these associations with things that just aren't you. So if you're a satellite company or a satellite integrator or manufacturer, you should really not have anything to do with astronauts unless you've got a very, very good reason why. If you've got, an astronaut working for you, even, I don't think that's a strong enough reason. If you're using the NASA typeface everywhere. Okay, so is the rest of the space industry. If you're using stars in your logo, same thing goes for rockets. So if you're a rocket company, fine, but there's a lot of companies out there using these tropes and stereotypes, and the industry is saturated with them. So it's just a blind spot to watch out for. And if you have any of these things already, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. It's just that you have an opportunity to now to develop distinctive assets in other places. So generally, my advice here would be to just leave these things. The rest of the space industry is already fighting over them. That's not your fight. Just leave it to them. So it sounds overwhelming, but it's not. If you know where to look, there's plenty of opportunities out there. So think about origin stories. So a former SpaceX engineer was sitting on his porch looking at fireflies flying through the night. He wanted to found a company. He realized that these fireflies looked a little bit like spacecraft traveling to distant planets, and came up with the name for Firefly. That became the identity of this company, which IPO'd a couple of weeks ago, and is the first commercial company to land on the moon. They use the distinctive color of fireflies. They use a firefly in their logo. No other space company can copy paste that because they've got that story. If you look at culture, this is a traditional phoenix emblem from Chinese culture. This company, Landspace, they're not using it as their logo. They're using it to brand all of their launch vehicles. Why? Because it's associated with fire. It's got the red color, which is deep in Chinese culture. It's moving forward. It's a bird that flies. It has all the connections. So it makes it a great emblem and motif for their fleet of launch vehicles. It's not their logo. It's just for the launch vehicles. So it segments them and differentiates them. You can see it on the launch pad. You can see it on the side of their transport vehicles. If we look at ground stations, often ground stations, there's several here in the UK, they're just blank. Here in Australia, Alice Springs have actually customized theirs. So they've used local culture, ancient patterns from the local region to brand theirs. So they're super distinctive and you can spot them a mile away. If we then move to products and functionality, obviously, like we were just saying in the other presentations, which are fantastic examples, like picking out this idea that the technology doesn't sell itself. This company realized that. They realized that their technology, obviously it performs highly, but on a functional level, but on an experiential level, it just wasn't. And so they branded it with their brand pattern. So every single SKU or product, let's say, in their line and in their portfolio has that same pattern. So you know that if you pick one up, you know that it belongs to this larger family and anybody can spot one in an expo. And ironically, the sales grew double, I believe, year on year for 3 years following the rebrand. And I asked them about it and they said, yeah, sure, market's grown and we can't put it down solely to our branding, but it's definitely been a factor. So it's actually helping to boost sales as well, that awareness. This example is a mission called Grace FO, and they use the geometry of the vehicle to make a typeface for that vehicle to launch it. So this is done by an agency, I believe here in the UK, called Accept and Proceed. And what they did is just looked at what's unique about this vehicle, what's special, and how can we translate that into our typography. And then obviously you've got Blue Origin's merchandise lines using the shape of their catch-all as kids' play tents. And then you've got Kongsberg Nano Avionics using, solar panels as their wayfinding systems as well. And then finally, if we look at heritage, this is an interesting one because, you've got so much heritage in this industry already, like a good 50, 60, even 70 years worth to look back on and dig out. But don't just show the rocket, take something different, take something interesting and take something unexpected and unique. So in this case, with Mercury Redstone, ABL Space Systems, which have pivoted into a different industry now, but at the time, what they did is study the architecture of the vehicle, the functionality, the tech, but they also realized, there's this distinctive pattern on the rocket. And yes, it's used for tracking back in the Mercury days, but we're going to lift that pattern and put it on our launch vehicles because, it's our little bit of history that we're including. Doesn't serve a functional benefit, it just serves an emotional one and a brand distinctive asset purpose. And then finally, if we look at Boeing, so Boeing's typography is this angle, the Stratotype logo, very famous. What they did for Starliner is transferred this into a brand pattern which they strung around the vehicle, and you actually notice it before you even see the Boeing or Starliner logos. So again, it's finding an origin for that brand pattern in Boeing heritage and then applying it to all the different touch points, including transport vehicles as well. So you've got these 4 different starting points now. You've got origin story, products, culture, and heritage. And if you're a space company looking to make yourself that bit more distinctive, these are good thought starters and places to start digging. So finish off, I'll just say there are no low interest categories. There are just really low interest brands. So it doesn't matter what you're making, whether it's an amplifier or whether it's a rocket engine or whether you're just selling data. There's something interesting in your category and especially in your brand, and you just got to dig for it. This is a quote from Isaiah Langoy, who is the executive strategy director at Anomaly, a phenomenal agency out there. I'll finish off and just say the journey to being interesting and being distinctive has to start with the truth. So stop looking at rockets and astronauts and stuff unless that's what you do. Look at who you are, and that's where the treasure lies. So yeah, you can always follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And that is it.
Thank you very much, Ed. That was a very interesting presentation. And especially the last line, I agree with that. You need to look at who you are. I think a lot of times, this is a classic case of mine as well. I come from a background of geology with a specialization in satellite and remote sensing. And I was not knowing the aspect that I really love architecture. But the moment I entered the space industry, but then of course it's too late at the age of 28 and 29, you can't go back and do a bachelor's degree again, right? So that sentence really hit me hard. You need to look at yourself, who you are first, so that you get a real insight into what is the main thing that is fueling it. I think the Firefly example is one of the best examples. As you mentioned, no one can basically copy them. So it's very important. I would like to mention, as the conversation has come to the full circle, looking at other brands, I think it's not really a good thing, but looking at yourself inside yourself and your motive and vision, as I mentioned in the narrative building as well, the vision, identity, and purpose is extremely important. And I think it directly connects with what Ed said. Identity, purpose, and vision, you can't find it unless and until you dig deep into yourself itself. I mean, not only yourself as an individual, but yourself as a company, as a group, or as an organization as well. And it can be a government as well. We see a lot of governments also struggling with the narratives and related things.